Houston Cougars, a furious comeback to knock off Duke and advance to the national championship game.
Here is Zion Chris, big hole, open sesame. Zion Chris, wow, the 72-yard house call.
Stick it in your pipe and smoke it, baby. Yes!
Welcome to Scott Holland Podcast. Back here, firmly ensconced in this, the most wonderful month of the college sports calendar, March. And Bobby, we have Houston Cougar men's postseason basketball this week, a little under 48 hours as we sit here tonight and record to discuss plenty of that. Like, obviously, we pinch ourselves every time we get to this month and realize, oh yeah, it's not just that Cougar men's basketball is quite good, but you know, it's a consistent thing. Like
they're one of the gooders.
We're one of the gooders out there. It's pretty fantastic. Plenty of that to talk about tonight as well. In addition to the last regular season games that were played, discuss what we saw from that, what we think is worth discussing going forward into the postseason with those games. Plenty of Cougar stuff to talk about outside of that. We're going to stay with the hardwood at the conclusion of the women's basketball season. We also have a couple winter sports teams about to go to their championships. We'll check in on them. Bat and ball sports as well. Really spring sports aplenty as well. Buddy, how you doing?
Good, man. It's I got to travel to Arkansas later this week, so just trying to get everything situated around that, make sure that I have clean clothes and have my training that I'm going to do ready to go. So just kind of laying low for the next couple of days until I do leave out of town.
I recently had to explain to my not born in America significant other that that state is not pronounced Arkansas, even though there is a state called Kansas. And there is actually, I explained to them, there's also a river that's like spelled like Arkansas. That's the Arkansas River as well. So maybe you can check in on that while you're there.
Have you explained to them yet that Kansas City isn't in Kansas, where the Big 12 tournament's playing? Or are we going too far here?
I think I'm gonna need to wait until wait until I pop the question at some undetermined point in the future or something like that before we get down that road, buddy. But no, get back to the Cougs here. Mention really quick at the top, like I always do, patreon.com/SH podcast. It's the way to support the work that Bobby and I do here on a weekly basis, talking about all things going on with the Houston Cougars. Not maybe, he's actually just recorded it. Just dropped a little premium Big 12 episode as well. If any of that sounds good to you, patreon.com/SH podcast. Gonna lead with men's basketball talk here. Of course, obviously it's tempting to go straight to the postseason. Like that's the most exciting part, but we do have two games that were played from the last week that was. We're going to talk about them as well, going from least to most recent in terms of how they happened. We're going to kick it off with the men's basketball game against Baylor last Wednesday night, senior night, a 77-64 Cougar victory. Saw some great players in this program honored, saw multiple players that have been obviously very good hoopers in this program, probably playing their final game at the Fertitta Center in that one, which is thankfully a Cougar win. And the joke between us after this one final Wednesday night was that we're just going to ignore the 30 plus minutes of the game where Baylor held some kind of lead, right? And I won't lie, as Baylor got out to that early lead, and maybe even more in the parts of the late first half, early second half, where the Cougars would cut the lead to almost nothing, maybe tie it, Baylor would respond with their own little scoring burst. I got to be honest, as we reached those points in the game, my own words from last week's Baylor preview started ringing in my head about how certain I was that the Cougs weren't going to lose to this opponent, and especially certain that the Cougs weren't going to lose to this opponent on senior day of all nights. But thankfully, did not have to eat my words this week. As we've often seen this year, Cougs put into a higher gear and didn't just permanently retake the lead in the final few minutes of this game, but I would say for at least the last 6, 7, 8 minutes of this basketball game, well and truly ran Baylor off the court. Some of that certainly the Bears running out of gas. They were only running with a 7-man rotation this one, but the Cougs did some things in this game that if you repeat them later this month or God willing early April, could translate into great things for you in the postseason. Plenty to unpack from will be our final basketball home game until early November, which is a sad thought until you remind yourself of all the postseason basketball that awaits us. Bobby, stressful game until a very defined point when it definitely stopped being stressful. What were your takeaways from the senior night win over Baylor?
Yeah, man, if you watch this game without a scoreboard ticker or, score bug down at the bottom, you'd still think U of H won, but maybe not 13-point win, right? Um, I know it was senior day, so Khalifa Sacco got the start, but you did get 30 minutes from JoJo Tugler in this game, and he got you 14-6. I'm not like an expert, man, but try it. I don't know. Maybe start Sacco and let Tugler just kind of watch things. I'm not like actively calling for this constantly, but I don't know, man. It worked. It seems like
Just
it
throwing
worked
it
a
out
little.
there.
Yeah. Look, Samson knows these guys way better than I do, and he's forgotten more about basketball than I'll ever know. But I'm just saying it looked like it worked. But yeah, Tugler got you 14-6. Um, we talked a few weeks ago about about the defense getting fixed, and I said that we think we saw that the defense was fixed, but this Baylor team was going to be a test for you because this Baylor offense really isn't that bad. And really, if you go through Baylor's schedule, Baylor's lost a lot of games, but they've lost close games. Like they haven't really gotten blown out a ton where you're just like, man, this Baylor team's horrendous. But they've played good teams really close, so I feel like they were close all year, just never hit. So this offense was pretty good. I thought this was a pretty good defensive performance. We're so used to watching U of H suffocate teams and allow like 55 points that we forget that 64 is a really good performance against a top 30-35 KenPom team like Baylor. You go and look at a team like Arizona, number 3 rated KenPom defense. They gave up 79 to Colorado, surrendered 80 to the exact same Baylor team, gave up 78 to Utah. 64 is a pretty solid performance, man. So, I, you know, I, you're a victim of your own success, I guess, at some point. The 64 feels like, man, it feels like if we give up 64, that's a problem for us. We forget how good this offense is compared to offenses of the past couple of years, and maybe the defense doesn't need to be as good, but it still can be really solid. And we're seeing that with a game like this Baylor game.
Yeah, I'm confident saying if Baylor had been like a top 50-ish defensive team this year, they'd at least be on the bubble right now. They at least would have closed out some of
Agreed.
those games that you alluded to this year. Fortunately for us as Baylor haters and fans of a team that just played Baylor, they are not. But yeah, no, really, really good offensive team. I would say in the tier below elite, but in the first tier below elite. Like that's how good they are.
Yeah, number 24 according to KenPom.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No. I mean, it's to say, if they ever got that fixed, they're going to be a difficult team to deal with. The problem is the last several years, they've gone from being, they haven't gotten it fixed. They were, when they were the champions 5 years ago, and then immediately after that, and I think immediately before that, they were a good defensive team, but just have fallen off a cliff in that aspect of their game. You said not to give away something on the premium pod, but TCU came up as part of the larger men's basketball tournament in the Big 12 discussion. You talked about how that would be the team that would drive you nuts if you're a fan of them. And, again, whatever cursed universe parallel to this one, I'm a Baylor fan, don't want to think about, but that this team would drive me so nuts because they have elite scorer in Cameron Carr, although U of H did a good job denying the ball, which I'll get to. Tonde Yesufu, future pro, I think a guy who's at least worst case borderline first round pick kind of basketball player. And they just couldn't translate to anything other than like a lower half of the Big 12 team that came up close, but ultimately short by the most frustrating margins against the best teams they saw this year. Really, really hate that for Baylor. Really couldn't happen to a bunch of better folks. But I alluded to the top things from this game that if they happen in the postseason, I think could bode really well for Cougar fans. Nothing higher on that list is something you talked about. JoJo Tugler playing a lot of minutes. And admittedly, we can't answer the question of can JoJo Tugler stay out of foul trouble against the highest end of opponents. We can't confidently answer that yes, just based on the 2 games this week where he played a good amount of minutes because, frankly, these 2 final regular season opponents aren't tournament level teams. And what you could take away from a matchup versus Baylor probably doesn't translate to a hypothetical later round of the NCAA tournament game against a real high-end opponent. That said, even with all those caveats, these two games this week are reminders of how much the ceiling of Houston Cougar men's basketball is raised when Tugler is out there playing the majority of the game. That's no offense to Khalifa Sacco, who I'll say for not the first or last time this year, has gotten to a place that's way above where I expected he would be when I first saw him play for us in November, when I first saw him as an offseason signing from Sam Houston. But Tugler gives you so much more at the, as a big man, not just the shot blocking, defense, and rebounding, but offensively, even with some of the frustrating moments, I would say, especially earlier in the season, I don't think it's up for debate that he's become an improved scorer, both in volume and efficiency. I mean, Kingston and Emmanuel Sharp will rightfully get the bigger headlines for their contributions in this game, but in a game where you really weren't in trouble until the final few minutes, but were in trouble for a lot of time before that, if this was a game where Tugler hypothetically played 15 minutes or fewer and spent a lot of that time in the court in foul trouble, maybe the Cougs find a way to win, but you're in deep water there. It's a lot scarier getting from point A to point B if JoJo Tugler doesn't give you a lot of minutes and pretty good quality for the minutes that he's on the floor. I mean, purely for my in real time stress watching this, yeah, I would have preferred a 20-25 point kind of win. But yeah, in our last time watching Emmanuel Sharp and almost certainly Kingston Fleming at the Fertitta Center, it was cool to see those two guys will you back into the lead, play a big part in the Cougs pulling away for good from the Bears and ultimately winning this one by a pretty comfortable margin in the final several minutes. It was really both guys doing a lot of what they've done best historically. Sharp making clutch three-pointers, as you saw the Cougs really erase Baylor's deficit for good, in addition to doing all the gritty Samson lead guard defensive work that maybe we, not saying take for granted, but maybe don't think of being as part of Sharp's game as much as the clutch three-point shooting. And I think nothing in the box score manifests that more than the fact that he led you with 3 steals. Fleming's led all scorers of the 21, was a maestro at slashing to the basket, making tough shots, was also in this one of the few Cougs out there consistently creating for his teammates. It had 7 of the Cougs' 10 total assists. And you have to give the Coug guards as a collective credit for the job they did on Cam Carr, which is kind of funny to say about someone who hit 75% of their 3-point attempts, but he hit a few in the first 10 minutes when Baylor was getting out to that early lead. And then you basically denied him the ball after that first 10 minutes of this game. And that is no small task to deny from a good offensive opponent, one of the Big 12's top scoring players, like the Cougs did, while Carr played the majority of this game. And I mean, like the Tugler scenario, thankfully this isn't how it actually played out. But I mean, imagine if Carr is able to get into the offense later on before he got to a commanding lead. I mean, you're really sweating that win. And
yeah, absolutely. You absolutely are.
Yeah. The fact that he's not involved in this one that much after the first 10 minutes of this game, I think is why we're talking about a Cougar win, and a Cougar win where, yes, you spent a lot of the minutes of this game trailing, but factually, really 5-6 minutes of this game wasn't in doubt who was going to win it.
Yeah, that's what you always want, right? The final 6 minutes of the game is kind of not in doubt. To your Tugler point, Tugler showed something that we haven't seen in his offensive game this year, and that was back to the basket, posting up a guy, hit a little turnaround bunny. Those little bunny hop shots that he's put up for most of the year this year have been back rim or short all year. They haven't even really been close. And in this game, he really said, no, we're actually going to do these today. And he was hitting the net, no problems. They weren't like off the backboard. They were really, really good shots. So if you suddenly start getting that from JoJo Tugler, if he's on the court more and he can get you that, it's really good, and you're going to cause some trouble in the NCAA tournament.
And something that continued something that we saw again on Saturday, which I think is certainly coloring our thoughts here, that, hey, it wasn't just, oh yeah, one off against Baylor and then went missing in your next game. Like you're seeing back-to-back games. You're seeing a guy, and we've seen it before this game, but you're seeing a guy who's starting to develop some confidence. And if he can stay on the court, I don't know if I go so far as to say the sky's the limit, but it raises your ceiling in ways that very few things that could happen for this team could do. Like, it just is such a game changer for the Cougs. Miscellaneous thoughts here. I'll give credit to Baylor guard Tonde Yesufu, somebody I singled out positively when we previewed them, who I think, if anything, made my qualified praise of him look like I was underselling him. Fan bases love to say their projected first-round player should come back to school for reasons that, Bobby, definitely aren't just that fan selfishly wanting that player to forego a multi-million-dollar payday and the chance to play professionally. But I have no dog in this fight. I mean, if anything, I probably want all talented players to leave Baylor ASAP, but having watched him 2 times now against U of H and watching at least some of several other Baylor games this season, to me, Yesufu kind of screams player who has obvious pro talent and potential in his game, who I think in the right program, whether that's a sophomore year at Baylor or somewhere else, I think could be a lottery pick, but I think needs another year in college. Like, you could see, and the way he at times bullied the Cougars for baskets, like, you don't see guys do that very often. You certainly don't see freshmen do it that often. But fantastic last Wednesday. Out of all the freshman performances we've seen against the Cougars this season, I would only put AJ DeBonsa and Darren Peterson in front of him. And I mean, the 2 guys just mentioned are the 2 guys who are odds on to be the top 2 picks in the next draft. So I think pretty good company for Yesufu. And you alluded to this earlier. I'm not going to put lipstick on the pig of Baylor's team this season, but not the first time they put a scare into one of the Big 12's top teams this season. They led by 7 at the half at home against Arizona. Were within a basket in the last minute or so. I think it ended up being a 7-point final margin, but one of those, like, the 7-point final margin didn't tell you how close that game actually was. Only lost by 3 at Iowa State and kept that one mostly close throughout. If anything, like, those near misses only add to, I'd imagine, the frustration of Baylor's fans. So, but I say that to say, not a huge surprise that they made the Cougs work for this a bit last Wednesday. And I leave this one with, because, at the time, as they're taking a lead on you, you can't help but, as a fan, think like, oh man, like, I would just hate the last game at Fertitta for all these great players who I love to be a loss, and a loss to these guys.
Yeah.
But now, having almost a week to kind of sit on it, I don't leave this game really worried about the fact that Baylor made you have to work for it ultimately.
Yeah, Baylor's made a lot of teams have to work for it.
I know I said I wouldn't talk extensively about the departing Cougar players, whether they be the super seniors or guys who are soon to be lottery picks, until we have all the season in the books. I did want to quickly zoom in on your 2 fifth-year seniors who were honored last Wednesday night, Sharp and Ramon Walker, because I think most Cougar fans who are more casual fans of the larger sport of college basketball, you can kind of generally conceptualize that fewer players these days stick around for a long college career at the same program. I still don't think your average Cougar fan realizes what a rare breed, Sharp and Walker are, to have given what they've given to this program and stayed with it their entire college career. And neither guy came in here super heralded. I mean, going back a bit, Walker only became a big role player as a freshman because of that disastrous week around Christmas when Marcus Sasser and Sherman Mark were both called done for that season. And all of a sudden, hey, you're missing 2 of your highest usage guards, and it's kind of every next man up here. Everyone's got to contribute here because we're a little short on bodies, and you had to give bigger minutes to mostly unproven guys like Walker and an unheralded 3-star who had started to show some promise. He was the backup point guard named Jamal Shedd. Had to lean on those guys a little bit. And I know largely due to various injuries, we haven't seen Walker's career develop in the linear way that we saw for Shedd, that we saw for Sharp, that we've seen for some of the lead guards that comes to this program. But anyone who's around that team talks about what a positive guy Walker is in that locker room. And I know he's going to be very much missed. I don't need to go through all of Sharp's career accomplishments just yet, but the same way you saw for Roberts last year, you saw how emotional Sampson got when it came time to embrace Sharp during the pregame ceremony. And again, not an off-the-radar recruit, but also not a guy who came in here as a consensus 4-star or anything, had to spend his first semester on campus, mostly rehabbing an injury that he picked up in high school ball. And to go from that to now putting himself in the conversation as one of those program greats, your all-time career leader in 3-point makes, part of 3 different Big 12 tournament regular season titles to date, most outstanding player of last year's Big 12 tournament, guy who's hit so many big shots. I'm really excited to see what that guy has left in him. I'm excited to see what's left to be written in his U of H story.
Yeah, I agree. It's you, like you said, U of H fans may not appreciate just how rare it is. There were 22 players who played every
I'm glad you had that
single
number. I was looking for it. I couldn't find it.
on a
Sorry.
senior night that played all their games with one school. 22 in the entire country. Sam, how many D1 teams are there? Like 342 or something like that?
365.
365, like the days of the year. And there's 22 in the entire country, and you had 2 of them. It's pretty good, man. That's a pretty good number, and something you should really appreciate in this, I guess, time of college athletics in the NIL and portal era.
Yeah, we really have it good as Cougar fans. I think we should all remind ourselves. And we also are going to discuss the regular season finale in the Saturday late morning, early time slot. Cougars travel to Stillwater. I didn't realize this was the first ever Big 12 matchup between these two programs in Stillwater specifically. I was kind of surprised about that one. I had
I thought we played them last year.
We did. We played him in Houston last year, and then in Houston 2 years ago as well. You might remember. I can't remember if it was last year.
I remember I was laughing at their stadium because it was called Historic. They put it up, and the name of the stadium was like Historic blah 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 Stadium.
Historic Calgary. Yeah, Historic Calgary.
Yeah, and I was
Arena.
like, are a lot of people claiming that place is historic? Weird. That must have been another game I was just watching.
Yeah, you might also remember we played a home and home with them back when we were in the AAC as well. We did one in Stillwater, and they randomly beat us with a not very good team in Houston during the 2019-20 season. If you just want my real-time reaction as I watched the Baylor game versus the Oklahoma State game, I was less surprised that this one proved challenging in the first half for the Cougars. Not that I felt great when we were down 13 or so inside of 10 minutes left in the first half, but I was and still am less surprised about that happening on the road against an opponent playing their home finale in senior day than I would have that was about the Baylor game being one that we trailed a decent amount of. My takeaways aren't exclusively positive, and I think we'll get to that as we discuss this game further, but just to briefly look at a fellow projected NCAA 2 seed trying to build their resume right now, I bet UConn and their fans would have loved a not always pretty road win when they lost to a worse Marquette team in Milwaukee this weekend. So not a win that should be entirely described by positive talking points, but plenty of clutch shot making from the usual suspects and 2 individuals who could be massively important to the postseason success of this team really stepping up in this one in a big way, as well as the usual suspects. Bobby, what did you see from this one that was worth talking about?
Yeah, I think the thing that really stood out to me was at 12:19 left in the first half, you scored your 16th point. You didn't score your 20th point until 5:46 left. 7 minutes, 5 points because you got up to 21 there. Little scary there, but again, you're playing on the road in a historic arena. On a senior day, so you can kind of do it, but that can't happen against good teams. We've talked about it all year. That cannot happen against good things. But you did that thing that Samson teams always do, though. You beat them into submission. Like, yes, they got up on you, but you knew late in this game that the Cougs were going to, take that next step and really Anaconda vice them and win. A few weeks ago you also talked about bench scoring, and we will see if it continues. But you got to call out Chase McCarty here. He got you 20 off of 6 3-pointers. First half wise, as a team, you feel like you probably could have looked better, but the second half you gave up 34 points. Sam, kind of funny thing as I was going through the box score. They were 7 of 17 from 3 in the first half. Second half, they were 3 of 13 from 3. You win by 7. That's pretty big there. It's just crazy to watch it. And then it's really funny breaking these games down every week. I kind of feel like a robot who says the same thing. But you had less turnovers in the second half versus the first. In the first half, this is something I noticed, and I kind of went through and looked at different games. You could really see tempo and how it changes the game for the Cougs. In the first half, 65 shots were put up. This isn't like a perfect tempo like description here, but 65 shots were put up and you were down 4 at the end of the first half. In the second half, only 57 combined shots went up. You won it by 11. UH wants to play with a very deliberate pace, and for, fun, we'll say that. I went back and kind of looked at some other games. Um you have multiple games where you you just do better when you put up less shots in a half. You tend to score more in that sense. Just seems once we get near that kind of 60 shots combined in a half, things really start to tank for the Cougs. Once you get over that 60 number and a half combined, obviously, things just start to not look as good, and things get in trouble for the Cougs. I went back and kind of looked at some of the games that we lost, and obviously those games get up to like 67, 68 per half. So it's just something that you just notice. You look at Ken Palm, we're one of the slowest teams in the country, but at the end of the day, that's kind of what the Cougs want to do, is just prevent the other team from putting up shots.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think Oklahoma State, a team that really likes to play with tempo about as much as anyone that we saw this regular season. 67 is maybe like a few possessions more than U of H wants to play at, but you clearly, and I think in the time of the game where it was decided, made Oklahoma State play at your pace. And is that the only reason you won? No, but I think that's a big overall reason why we're talking about a Cougar win right now than the opposite. Safe to say, out of the two of us, I'm the one who's slightly more glass half full on this year's team. Not saying you're a pessimist in any real serious way. So I'm going to start here with my only real strong negative takeaway, something you at least touched on, the slow start once again. And I don't think the slow starts are a defensive problem. Cowboys got off to a hot shooting start, but you saw water find its level, as I suspected it would, and they didn't sustain their early game shooting levels for the entire 40 minutes. And conversely, the Cougs, when it was all said and done, shot well above their season averages, minus the free throw line, where you didn't really go there that much anyway. Ultimately, most games, especially not NCAA tournament games, those aren't going to be 40-minute offensive exhibitions. Even very good teams have dry spells. My concern, that again, I will note is not my biggest takeaway necessarily, but I will say it's my biggest negative takeaway, is the slow starts. I mean, you started slow in this one, trailed by as much as 13 before cutting it to 4 at the half. Before that against Baylor, I mean, you were down by 10 at multiple points in the first half. We're trailing, I think, with 8 minutes left in that basketball game before coming back and winning. Colorado was a slow start, but I mean, only a few minutes. I don't want to overplay that one, but at least you got to a slow start in the first several minutes of the game. Arizona was a slow start early, where you spent most of the game seemingly trying to dig out of that slow start, ultimately unsuccessfully. Iowa State was a slow start on the road. K-State was a slow start, though I think, like Colorado, I'm not going to overplay that. Cougs didn't ultimately sweat that one too much. You know what's ironic?
What's that?
This team's most decisive loss this season, the Kansas game at Kansas, was your best start in the last month of regular season basketball, and you ended up losing that one. I'm not saying the good start is the cause. That was just, as I was looking at this, I kind of laughed when I saw it. I was like, our one really good start recently was ultimately a blowout loss. So maybe this all doesn't matter. My concern isn't even necessarily an opening weekend kind of concern, because this team hasn't lost to an opponent outside the Ken Palm top 19 in the country. It's one of those second weekend or later tournament games against the level of opponent where the slow starts can really be terminal, that are scary. Again, not my biggest takeaway, just something that I think merited mention, as this game is one data point among many and recent slow starts. You also alluded to this, really excited about what we saw from Chase McCarty, obviously having his career game in Stillwater, but also once again, JoJo Tugler. I mean, it's not just the fact that he played 33 minutes. That does help. It's not just that he had a stat line that reads as a good Tugler game, but it's the specific shots he made. He made tough shots. He looked confident making those tough shots, maybe more confident than we've ever seen him look offensively this season or any of the previous ones. Because at the start, he looked like somebody who was not entirely in game shape, which we knew he'd had some off-season stuff. And you saw it in fits and starts over the season. The offensive game gradually improved, but I would love to talk myself into this game and also the good efforts against Baylor and Colorado being really meaningful efforts that JoJo is starting to play his best basketball offensively. Not just that he's able to stay on the court, because I don't think we take that as a locked-in given at this point, but that he's out there giving you quality minutes and he looks confident offensively and also does the defense and rebounding stuff that you kind of take for granted that JoJo Tugler's going to do for you. I'd love to talk myself into Chase McCarty, who again, obviously had an outstanding game, 20 points, 6 of 9 from 3-point range. I'd love to say this is the start of him playing his best basketball here on the eve of the postseason. And this kind of performance is obviously going to be an outlier in his overall season, but seeing how well he could shoot the ball in addition to doing all the dirty work stuff that Sampson demands of anyone who plays extended minutes, I mean, that's got to be an exciting long-term thought for us and for any Cougar fans, because we've both talked about the need for more bench contributions, and would be foolish to say that it's problem solved here because of 3 decent data points against Big 12 opponents who really aren't in the league's creme de la creme. But I'd also be, I think, foolish to entirely dismiss the good things we've seen from McCarty recently, that we've seen from Mercy Miller recently. And I don't want to kick a man while he's down here, but I don't believe Isaiah Harwell right now has earned serious bench minutes the way that those two guys have earned it, the way Khalifa Sacco has earned it. And I think we're starting to see from this game and going forward, the 8-man rotation come time for postseason games. You know, I mean, outside chance you get to 9 or 10, but we know Kelvin goes tighter on those rotations come postseason time. And I really do think this starting 5 plus Miller, Sacco, and McCarty, like that's your bench going to the tournament. I really do think that we've found the rotation that works best for us. Fun little trivia question for you now that we have left this game entirely. Now that we are done playing any true road games this season, everything from here is neutral site. Bobby, we've now completed 3 Big 12 men's basketball regular seasons. How many road games have the Cougs lost over those 3 seasons?
Well, you lost 3 this year. Did you
Correct.
lose? I want to say 3 this year.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it's 5 total.
Correct.
Yeah.
5 total. 2 in the first season and then 3 this year. 4 of those 5 have come at the league's, I would say, 2 most historically, or certainly recent historic tough venues. You had 2 at Fog Allen and 2 at Hilton Coliseum, which, add that to the list of things we should be grateful for as Cougar fans, because most programs don't do this well on the road. Most programs don't do this well against this level of competition.
Sam,
league. What?
I just went back and looked. It's 6.
What was the 6th one I was missing?
24. You lost at Fog, at Hilton, at TCU.
At TCU, that's what I'm forgetting.
Yep. Because I said 4 or 5, and I had KenPom pulled up. That's the only reason why you're getting this fact check here, is I had KenPom pulled up.
Buddy, I could have fact checked myself, so that's on me.
And I was like, I was like 5, and while you were talking, I was like, which ones were they again? And I was like, hey, wait a minute. I was super wrong. I said 4 or 5.
And I was going to say, I messed up because I did this and could have referenced KenPom, and I wouldn't say you messed up.
Were you going off your memory?
No, I wouldn't know. I actually did reference KenPom, and just for whatever reason, I saw it, because it's like the TCU and Iowa State ones were kind of clustered at the start of the first Big 12 season. Now it's a fully operator error, no excuses on that, but still, six conference losses.
3 years is insane.
Insane in any league, and certainly insane in the Big 12. Bobby, do we have any other thoughts from Saturday's game at OSU?
No, nothing on that game, or really, like you said, I don't want to wrap things up too much and put a bow on anything when there's still lots of basketball to play.
No doubt. And we have postseason basketball this week. Technically, we've had postseason basketball since last week, as some conferences start their tournaments a bit earlier. Have already played championship games here as of Tuesday night, but we have Big 12 men's basketball this week. Actually began earlier today. in Kansas City. So to give you both our thoughts on that and a little taste of what you could be getting when you become a patron of the Scott Holland podcast, I'm going to give you a little taste of what Bobby and I had to talk about with the Big 12 men's basketball tournament on our premium episode. So the one that obviously has the impact on the Cougars was the game I just mentioned, the BYU West Virginia game. If you don't mind, Bobby, I'll give my thoughts on West Virginia first, since we've talked a bit more about all the other possible opponents, or in this case, opponent. I feel like we've talked about BYU a bit more.
Yeah.
We saw West Virginia, but it's been a while. I actually had to look back on this. It's been almost 2 months to the day. We saw them on January 13th at the Fertitta Center, the only head-to-head between these teams. Didn't remember this one really well, but as soon as I got to the box score, I was like, oh yeah, blowout game. Absolute blowout. Like, not that this was the only one where the Cougs really made their presence known early, but I want to say this one and ASU were the home game. We're some of the most dominant home games we've seen this year. Like, I went to the little the KenPom win probability graph. This one was 28-5 at one point. Don't think there will be a repeat of that. This game played on a neutral site, but I think West Virginia's big challenge against the Cougars, good defensive team in most of the areas where you would measure good defense, which is not surprising. Like, their head coach, Ross Hodge, came from North Texas, where the Mean Green were consistently one of the best defensive teams outside of the handful of best conferences in the country. That's clearly carried over to his time in Morgantown. But you and I, when we preview an opponent on a regular pod, we kind of talk about, okay, like, what can this team do? Like, what does a team have to be to be able to beat this Houston team? And I think both matchups of the Cougs have potentially, other than the fact that BYU they're not underseeded because it's based on their record, but there are not many teams in their resume out there. I would almost guess none that are a 10 seed in their conference. Because I believe Indiana is the 10 seed in the Big Ten. That was the only other conference I was thinking maybe. And they're like a bubble team. Like, they're, I would say, considerably worse resume-wise than BYU. But I still like both these matchups. West Virginia obviously be the one I prefer, because to kind of finish my long windup there, they're not close to being the level of offensive team that I think you need to be to beat the Cougars. I mean, look at the teams that have beaten the Cougars this year: Tennessee, Texas Tech, Kansas, Arizona, and Iowa State. All varying degrees of very good offensive team. Not all exactly the same. They don't all get from point A to point B the same way doing it, but all very good offensive teams. And West Virginia, for all the things they do well, they're a good interior team. Something to watch the Cougars. This is a well outside the top 100 offensive efficiency team. And I can't see a team with that profile, at the risk of arrogance, at the risk of saying this before the possibility of a future upset here. I just really don't see it happening if that's the team the Cougs see, Bobby.
Yeah, if it's West Virginia, I'm a lot more confident than I am versus BYU. I think kind of going through, you look at the teams that, like you said, will give U of H some problems. They're teams that force a lot of turnovers. Yeah, West Virginia doesn't do that, really. You look at teams that shoot well from the line. That's not West Virginia. They are 328th in the country for free throw percentage. They just don't make their free throws. They don't steal the ball. Now, they don't give it away a ton, but they're not great at not giving it away. It's one of these situations where if you look and you go, wow, top 20 defense, and their offense is 137 on KenPom. That's not too bad. Maybe they could give some teams a fit. It just feels like this is one of those teams where U of H just matches up really well with them, and it's like they want to be U of H. They're just not as good at being U of H as U of H is, and the original just does it better. It's just a bad matchup for West Virginia. Just like we always seem to be a bad matchup against, like, Alabama in Nate Oates. Nate Oates always plays us strong. We always seem to lose to Nate Oates in those teams. And so sometimes you just don't match up with a team very well. And it seems like that's kind of the deal with West Virginia and U of H here.
Yeah, just not a level of offensive team that I think can really challenge the Cougs. I will shout out one guy on the team, Honor Huff. He was I think they only had 2 guys scoring double digits against the Cougs and didn't have a great game against the Cougs because nobody in West Virginia had a great game on that specific night. But
when you score 48, you can't expect many people to have a good game.
no one's gonna feel great at the offense there, but like has been quite good. They in their regular season finale at home against UCF, a 15-point win as UCF kind of stumbles their way back towards the tournament bubble after looking like they were very much a lock there. 24 in that one, 19 in a home win over BYU before that. Guy's playing good basketball right now, and I would imagine he's going to be at or very near the top of the scouting report for the Cougs if this ends up being the opponent. But if I had to guess, which I mean, again, this isn't a guarantee. Like BYU did just lose by 8 less than 2 weeks ago to this West Virginia team, neutral site versus true road game differences aside. Still, gun to my head, I think that's the opponent we're going to see. And I do like this matchup, but to my earlier point about like what level of offensive team you need to be to beat this U of H team, BYU is that level. You can ask questions, and I will poke some holes in that in a sec, like of, hey, here are things that BYU doesn't do well that kept them from beating the Cougs in Provo, a game that wasn't a blowout or anything like that. But also, I think one in real time, as we watched it, we were both fairly confident that the Cougs with 2 O's would eventually pull out, which they did. So there are some areas of this matchup that don't work well for BYU if that's the team that the Cougs see. But gotta acknowledge, they are the level of offensive team that's good enough to potentially challenge. They do clear that bar of, hey, like, this team does enough well offensively, even without Richie Saunders, who's out for the year injured, even with AJ DeBonsa mostly carrying the scoring load. Like, that's still like AJ DeBonsa and Pop Wright, their point guard. Like,
they're good enough to beat you by themselves.
They are. They're going to have to beat you by themselves. And quite frankly, Richie Saunders did so little against the Cougs whenever we did see him. He was just speaking of bad matchups that I don't know if that really changes. I don't think I'd have dramatically different thoughts about BYU as I sit across from you if Richie Saunders was back healthy, other than maybe thinking, hey, in the future, this team could have a higher tournament ceiling because they have this guy. I don't think it changes the matchup with U of H at all.
No, I mean, you look at what he did. He scored 7 in 33 minutes. Not great. But
his best against us was 10 points, I want to say, in like a Big 12 championship loss a season or two ago.
Yeah, it definitely feels like one of those guys that Sampson's like, yeah, we're not letting him beat us. Like, there's a 0% chance that guy's going to beat us here. But you did have DeBonta and guy you mentioned, Robert Wright, go off for 45 themselves in that game. I don't think, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, that game didn't feel like we were trying to hold on. Like, you had to play good defense in the second half. You fell down at one point by 3 to BYU, and then you just stifled them with your defense. They had long stretches of non-scoring in the first half. They scored a bucket to pull within 2 and score 17 points, 9:01 left in the first half, and they had scored 3 points in 6 minutes. Like, that's pretty good against an offensive team like that. If you can get that kind of performance again, taking out Saunders, I think, will help a lot. Saunders did have 7 boards in that game, got him a couple of opportunities that they maybe didn't have before. So overall, I do think that I would rather not have to play BYU. I'd rather play West Virginia, but I still feel pretty confident with what the Cougs look like versus that BYU team.
Yeah, one thing you did get that I'm not sure you'll get a repeat of from the regular season matchup in Provo versus if you see them in the Big 12 tournament, they missed 12 free throws. And they're not an elite free throw shooting team, but they're not a bad one. They're like borderline top 100. I don't think you'll get that again. I think you're going to be some number of free throws underwater to them because they're decent at getting to the line. Or at least DeBonsa's good at getting to the line, and that means as a team, they're decent. Cougs just don't do it a ton, and BYU is very good defensively at preventing teams, so I think that's something to watch, but not a good perimeter defensive team. I think that's been something that's been kind of a bugaboo really all 3 of their years in the Big 12. I could be wrong on that one, which I think is good. Like the Cougs, like you have 3-point shooters, but it's not been something this team has consistently done excellently. If BYU isn't really playing crisp perimeter defense and Sharp's able to get into a rhythm, and then one other guy, whether that's Kingston, whether that's even like Sanak or McCarty, gets in a rhythm there. Like I think if BYU defends like a bottom 20% of the team or bottom 25% of the country in terms of perimeter defense in this one, like Cougars aren't a great 3-point shooting team, but they do it enough, and there's multiple guys who can get hot, especially Sharp, man. If Sharp gets really hot in this one, I think BYU is going to have a hard time winning it. And I think you see kind of the flip side. I know we talked about West Virginia being a bad matchup. I think BYU has more of the ingredients to beat the Cougs with 2 O's. Excuse me. I have to remember I'm doubling up on the Cougs in this hypothetical matchup here. They have the ingredients to do it, but also, man, we've got 3 pretty strong data points in head-to-head matchups here. Blew them out last year for Tita, beat them only a little bit less comfortably in the Big 12 championship, and then beat them by 11 at Provo, an 11-point final margin that I think they like fouled us in a weird. I think I remember they fouled us like we were up 9. We're like, cool, thank you. You're let's
I remember I
here.
texted you. I texted you and I was like, I guess we'll take the double-digit win versus the top 25 Ken Palm. Yeah, that
maybe not a double-digit win, and how it actually played out, but also not a double-digit win where it was like, oh man, 2 minutes beforehand I was like biting my fingernails. Like, no, it was pretty clear the last 5-6 minutes of this game that U of H was going to be the team that won it. So pretty confident there. And I think, like I said, the top, I think a semifinal is kind of the floor of what this team will ultimately do in the conference tournament. And we'll stay on the hardwood for at least a bit here as the Cougar women's basketball season came to an end, as we expected last week in Kansas City at the Big 12 Women's Basketball Championship. Kind of a microcosm of the season in a loss to BYU. Cougars with 2 O's were competitive at times, but just didn't have enough in the closing stages of this game to really put pressure on the opposition for the upset. Lost that one 77-66. Bobby, what were your thoughts on the season's finale?
Yeah, man, I was actually off the day that this game aired, so I remembered it was on about halfway through the second quarter and popped it on and watched most of this game. I was actually pleasantly surprised with how close this game was, man. You were tied at the half, you cut it to 3 with 6:41 left, and then you just got cold. You just couldn't make a shot. Just multiple times I watched this team this year. That was the big bugaboo, is they would look good at times and then it would just get ice cold. Not just like a little cold, like Cougar men's basketball cold, like colder than cold, right? And so yeah, disappointed in the game, but looked more competitive than I probably thought we would be in this game. What about you, bud? What'd you see in it?
Definitely let myself get a little. I was watching at the same time you were referencing there. When it cut to 3, I was like, can we do it? Can we keep our season alive for one more game? And really is the hope that kills you. It was a nice final college game for super senior TK Pitts, one of the group of vets that Coach Mitchell brought in here this season. Offense wasn't always consistent with Pitts in her lone U of H season, but lit all starters with 14 points in addition to having 10 boards and 5 steals. Certainly those latter 2 categories were areas where Pitts made her impact positively felt for the Cougs this season. Shan Anumele had a team high 17 points, largely because she went a perfect 11 of 11 from the free throw line. Freshman Jay Jones also added 11 points and 3 steals. Like you said, the problems this game were kind of emblematic of the problems this team had all season. The big problem this team had all season, putting the ball in the basket, man.
Yeah.
I mean, even your leading scorers, Pitts and Anumele, who I just referenced, didn't have great shooting performances, and most team did worse. I mean, we're going to go big picture here in a moment of the season, but it really was that simple. This was a poor shooting team. Only one that really didn't improve appreciably in that specific category from last season, where this was also a very poor shooting team. And you have to be freakishly good at doing everything else to not have poor shooting be something that is fundamentally a major hindrance, especially in a league as good as the Big 12. This game was just the final example that you never saw this team stop fighting. And I could see that in this game. I could say that from watching a good chunk of the season, but playing hard can only overcome but so much.
Yeah, you can Jimmy's and Joe's, right? Talent has to get you somewhere. Working hard can overcome the difference between a 4 and a 3-star. But at some point, a roster full of 5 stars is going to win more games than a roster full of 3 stars. Does it happen all the time? No, but talent usually wins here. Sam, go big picture on the season if you don't mind, unless you have more thoughts.
No, I was just going to say, it was the problems of this game were the problems that you and I were texting each other about after watching 2 or 3 games this season.
Any game that you saw this year, it was
like a bucket getter.
Yep.
But yeah, go big picture, buddy.
Yeah, so kind of my final season thoughts on it. I think this was clearly a bigger build than I think any of us. I think we knew it was a big build, but I think it may have been a bigger build than even Coach Mitchell knew he was kind of walking into. I still believe in this staff. You do lose your top 3 scores, Sam. You got a lot of experience in for younger players this year, though. Players like Kayla King, who played in 30 games, didn't score a ton, but I think you saw something in her that gives you a little bit of hope there. Same with freshman Jay Jones. If you can keep Kiara Merchant to be a senior next year to come back for you and play, you should be better next year. Just getting some players on the court that you didn't expect to be on the court, get them some experience early. I think that's going to bode well for this team heading into next year. You can keep building on that again, especially if you keep that senior leadership in Kiara Merchant. Should wait and see what the staff can do in the portal. You had the transfers this year to really kind of keep you competitive, but you can see how the young players got their playing time. You knew that they needed to get into the game to really develop. I think the women you brought in were really just make sure we don't go over in everything this season. It's going to be fun to watch this team kind of develop. Like I said earlier, still a huge believer in where the program is headed. I still believe in it. Would I have loved to have seen more this season? Of course, but I also know this kind of stuff takes time. The portal will be important, like I said earlier, but seeing the recruiting has also been really important, more so than in a lot of men's sports. Women's basketball, yes, the transfer portal can make a big difference, but that's for like the top echelon transfers make the biggest differences. And U of H just doesn't have women's basketball top tier portal money, I don't believe. I don't think you're getting a player like that, but you have to recruit well and get players in early, and I think you did that. And then I kind of did a little bit of digging on some recruits and what we have coming in. You got 3 recruits coming in, and the first thing I noticed that 2 of them were players that were both 6'2". That's a lot of size. If as of now, heading into next year, they will be the 3rd and 4th, tied for the 3rd tallest players on this team. That's crazy to hear from a freshman, right? That shows that there's clearly a lack of size. And, Coach Huey's system was a move the ball quick, get up and down the court. We need to go kind of system. Size doesn't play well in that. That's just how it goes. And it's clear that the new staff noticed the lack of size and has done something about it. Like I said, you're kind of going to put it in football terms. Not that I always love using other sports to explain different sports, right? But it's kind of like going from a run and shoot and then hiring a triple option coach. It's going to take a minute to get some of the right coaches in there, or the right players in there, to make sure that it fits your system properly. So just something I kind of noticed just breaking down the team. This rebuild, I think it's such a stark change in what they want to do in terms of a system from what it was to what it is now. You relied a lot on not being able to make buckets, but getting a lot of buckets under the previous assistant under the previous system. And now you're seeing kind of the consequences of that when you try to slow it down a little bit. Not saying that we were a slow tempo team this year, but you definitely saw there weren't as many shots put up in women's basketball this year for the Cougs, and you saw that low shooting percentage really hurt this offense.
Like I said in last week's pod, when we talked about this team, was a little disappointed that you couldn't at least split the final 2 regular season games against Arizona and UCF teams that were at least around you in the Big 12 standings, but not really disappointed or surprised. This was a difficult first season for Matthew Mitchell. You had one player coming back in total who played any meaningful minutes last year, and Mitchell and the new staff basically had to build an entire roster pretty late in the cycle from when they were hired last spring out of veteran transfers and the high school recruits that you had in the previous staff, both of whom, by the way, Kayla King and Jay Jones. I agree with you. I think they both showed enough promise to potentially be excited about them in the future. We've both talked about it almost ad nauseum now. This team struggled to put the ball in the basket. That's not a problem you can really solve for in season. That's an off-season recruiting. That's a roster construction kind of issue. And as we've established, it's not as if the staff was working under a normal situation and building the roster last offseason. But for me, now the clock really starts on Mitchell and the staff. How do they approach portal recruiting? What impact can that really promising incoming freshman class that you alluded to, what kind of impact can they make next season? And what has Mitchell learned about coaching in college basketball versus when he stopped in 2020 previously? I think those are your big questions going to next season, but I'm excited to see how those get answered. And we'll certainly be keeping a close eye on the portal recruiting here as team seasons kind of end here in March and early April, but would have preferred multiple Big 12 wins. I'm still not really disappointed or putting a lot of stock in this season's results. The problems of this season's team were apparent after you and I had watched 2 or 3 games and didn't really change as the competition picked up in conference play. They played hard. I think this guy's a good face of the program. I think next year is when you start to judge the on-court results a little bit.
Yeah, I think this year in college sports now with the portal, you don't get many year zeros anymore. It's usually like you need to come in, bring some. You hired a coach who I think is a really good coach, but he didn't come from another successful program immediately, right? He came from not coaching. So it's not like he's going to go poach all of his good players. They don't play college basketball anymore. And then not only that, but then you also look at where this team was, and yeah, you definitely see the year zero aspect of this.
I'm always a believer, and yeah, like the portal, agree with you, the portal like accelerates the timetable, I think, for everyone. I do believe in a program where U of H was, which is to say probably one of the least resourced power conference programs. I think you can have a year zero, but also you start seeing something next year, whether that something is, hey, we won 5 or 6 Big 12 games. We picked off a couple non-conference games against better opponents we've been beating recently. Like that could be the answer to the question. Like, that's fine. It is a brutally difficult league. Like, Arizona State had one of the best first years of a new head coach in women's college basketball, and they're still squarely in the tournament bubble because this league just cannibalizes itself in both men's and women's basketball. So it's a hard league to build out of because
Yeah.
The vast majority of your conference games are going to be against either a NCAA tournament level team or a team that's just in that other tier of good teams that are just outside the postseason. Like,
Yeah.
that's a brutal place to build from.
Yeah, you got to somehow convince people. You got to convince players to still come here and build something. And you saw that with Sampson in his first couple of years. Like, look, we're going to build something. The difference is he was in the American. Now you're in the Big 12, arguably one of the best women's basketball conferences in the country.
Yeah, record wise, I guess if it's an American Conference program, I don't know if Matthew Mitchell is coming to it, but just hypothetically, that record probably looks a lot better in the American versus Big 12. But the team strength probably not that different.
Exactly.
So we'll go to the spring sports here, get on the diamond, because we have Big 12 baseball starting this week. And we'll talk a little Cougar baseball now. Not that much to say about the week that's passed. Cougs lost the home leg of the Don Sanders Cup 5-2 to Sam Houston. Discussed it briefly on last pod. And then on the weekend, you swept an overmatched Arkansas Pine Bluff team in a weather-interrupted weekend series. Swept the weekend as expected. I will pick these 2 nits about it. In the opener, your starter, Paul Schmitz, got shelled. He had to overcome a 7-0 early deficit to ultimately outslug the Lions 13-9. And then Kendall Hoffman has a really strong start in the middle game, but poor relief pitching meant you had to win that one via a 9th inning walk-off. nobody is going to look at U of H's season resume and really look at these 3 games. My concern here isn't that. It's that you're about to be playing much tougher Big 12 opponents who have a much better chance of exposing these flaws, that you may have than Arkansas Pine Bluff. There have absolutely been moments in non-conference play where this team has shown themselves capable of competing against good opponents. You beat Wake and Bama. You had a really close loss in Frisco to Oregon State. But there still hasn't been enough of that for me to feel wildly confident going into conference play,
Yeah, absolutely. My top line here on my notes is I don't know how you can leave a 3-0 weekend a little more concerned than you did entering it, but I kind of did because of the quality of the opponent you played here. Not trying to, smash Arkansas Pine Bluff, but you gave up 9 on Friday, like you said. Your starter gives up 5 in the first inning, gives up a grand slam. One bad pitch gets you, you could make that argument, but also you had the bases loaded and you'd already walked a run in that inning. So he got hit hard. Schmitz got hit hard. You were able to jump on them in the 6th and you put up 7 runs. You follow that up with having to walk off Arkansas Pine Bluff. That's a little concerning. Like you said, great start in that game, and then your relievers surprisingly were the ones who kind of disappointed you in that game, and that's not something you've seen from this team. The relief pitching from this team has been pretty good. It was really good last year too. Yes, there was a player involved who made it pretty obvious that the relief pitching was going to be good, but that hasn't really been a problem. It really seems like this coaching staff knows how to get the most out of their mid relievers, and so a little weird to kind of see him get shelled like that. You're hoping this weekend was a bit of an anomaly more than anything. So yeah, that was kind of my thoughts on the weekend. You'd like to see a little bit more, but I thought overall you went 3-0. Cool to see Ken Griffey Jr. was out at the park. Really wish I was there for that just to see the kid. Even though I grew up watching him beat my team in a not fun way a lot.
Yeah, no, iconic player. I feel like, which is weird because I grew up in the Houston area, so yeah, obviously played about as far from the Houston area as you can. But I played Little League with so many guys who were like would imitate the Ken Griffey swing. Like that was CC Sabathia was there as well, watching his son Karsten, who plays for the Cougs as well. Yeah, it was cool to see him out at Schrader Park. Like it felt surreal seeing the picture of like, oh, that's Ken Griffey. Like Ken Griffey's
Ken Griffey and CC Sabathia.
Baseball. Yeah,
and
exactly.
CC Sabathia, whose son plays for us. You're like, oh, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's wild. We had a nice start to this week. I was gonna say before. Oh, do you have any other thoughts?
No, I was just gonna say after this weekend, this is one thing that like I forgot to say. After this weekend, it really feels like this team is a bubble team. If that makes sense. Like they might be on the bubble. Like they might get some discussions about being on the bubble. You might see them sneak in there. It feels a little bit like an Auburn situation in men's basketball where it's like you probably shouldn't be on the bubble, but you're on the bubble.
Yeah, I think I only believe the most extreme outcomes of this team. I believe they'll either be on the bubble or I believe they'll be somewhere around the preseason pick, which was 12th out of 14 in this league. I think I believe those two more than I believe any scenario where you land somewhere in the middle there.
Yeah.
We did get the week off to a nice start a little bit earlier tonight. I think it went final in the last 30 minutes or so. The Cougs beat Rice in the first game of the Silver Glove Series at Schrader Park 13-1, which always feels nice. Like I've said it on here when we win, I say it when we lose. Like midweek baseball, you shouldn't go too crazy about any midweek baseball result because it is the most volatile college baseball situation there. But Cougs did really well. Freshman Caden Cooper threw 5 1/3 scoreless, career long start for him. And the Cougs just really jumped on the Owls early, put up a crooked number in the first, third, and fourth, and really never looked back there. Was 8-1 for a while, and then the Cougs put this one on ice. Actually, a rare 8-inning run rule when the Cougs put up a 5 spot in the bottom of the 8th inning to win this one comfortably. And again, you don't want to go too crazy with like what this midweek game means, but this is probably the best Rice team post Wayne Graham that we've talked about in this podcast. They have first-year head coach David Pierce, who was a long time Wayne Graham assistant, was the head coach at Texas and Tulane and Sam Houston. And yeah, I don't know what them succeeding looks like in the modern era, because their halcyon days of the baseball program can't really be replicated now unless some super rich Rice guy decides to drop 7-8 figures on this roster. But it's a more competent team than some of the recent Rice teams we've seen, and the Cougs just barely looked like they were playing the same sport at the time tonight, and that feels pretty cool.
Yeah, I think the funniest thing, like you said, or an 8-inning run rule after the 5. The even rare walk-off home run for the run rule is what gets you there. So just kind of a crazy thing to really think of there. So actually, hold on, I'm looking. Was it a grand slam?
1, 2, 3. Yeah, walk-off grand slam by Justin Charrington.
Walk-off grand slam to run rule a team. That's fantastic. In the
you got a bunch of guys out there too. You subbed pretty liberally. You got to see like Alex Solis has been pretty solid for you. Caden Cooper's has moments, but like it's not like you for some reason threw like all of your first choice arms out there or like left the starters in. Much as you can run up the score in baseball.
Yeah, just really funny to that like you said, an 8-inning run rule, and it's because of a walk-off grand slam to beat a team by 12. Like, that's just, as a baseball guy, you don't see that very often. That's what makes run rule games kind of funny and kind of interesting.
So they say about baseball, you quite often see something you've never seen before watching just a random baseball game.
Yeah, man, this might be it.
But the big attraction for this coming weekend is the opening of Big 12 play. The K-State Wildcats will be traveling to Houston to face the Cougs, and the Cats have a pretty similar resume to the Cougars, which I think is why you see these two teams grouped fairly close in the early RPI ratings that I've seen. They have a win against common opponent Iowa from the opening weekend, but not much in the way of really quality wins from their non-conference. I think the biggest challenge for the Cougs is going to be facing this K-State lineup that's hit super well in the early season. D. Kennedy's having a breakout junior year after being an every game starter last season, but not really one of their stronger hitters. But this season absolutely changed that, hitting .393 with 7 home runs and 8 stolen bases coming into the week. Ty Smolinski has one of the most eye-popping hit lines that I've seen from a college guy this season. He's batting .464, OPSing almost 1,600, and we'll note he didn't become a lineup regular until the past couple weekends, but I mean, he's coming to Houston absolutely smoking hot. In total, the Cats have 7 guys who are lineup regulars who are hitting above 300 for the season. They're hitting with power, so fair to say the Cougars need to pitch better than they have, especially in relief recently, to be in a position to win this series. We'll say K-State's pitching isn't as fearsome, but they don't walk a ton of hitters. They look a bit deeper than you do in terms of proven relief pitching. For their weekend rotation, Lincoln Sheffield and James Gayette will for sure be at least 2 of the weekend arms you see. But we'll say the Cats haven't had as much luck finding a proven third star for the weekend so far. But, I mean, if you're going to prove to us, the larger kind of skeptical fan base, that you, Houston Cougar baseball in 2026, are better than 12th out of 14 in the preseason like you're picked, I think this needs to be a series you take 2 of 3 from.
Yeah, that was kind of my thought as well. This is a great opening series to kind of show us what this Cougar team is going to be. You take 2 of 3 here, you feel really good about where this team sits. You're going to be better than 12th out of 14th, in my opinion. But if you lose 2 out of 3, you feel very, very worried about what this team will actually look like in the non-con. But overall, it seems to be like this is a series that you want to win. I think if you sweep this series, you're feeling ecstatic, and I think the one result you can't have here is get swept by this K-State team if you want to be thought of as anything more than 12th out of 14.
No doubt. So we'll stay on the diamond and check back in with Houston Cougar softball, which got their hardest series out of the way against Texas Tech last weekend. My pre-series stretch goal of the team playing all 21 innings without being run ruled probably was a bit optimistic. Cougs did ultimately
It was, but I
get
thought it was a good
ruled.
goal. I'll be honest. I thought it was a good goal, buddy.
It was never anything more than a stretch goal, but the Cougs did at least make the series finale interesting. You went up early, were tied at multiple points late, including 6-6 at the end of the sixth inning before Tech scored 6 in the top of the seventh to complete the weekend sweep. We knew this one would be really difficult, and that Houston Cougar softball this season, probably not most seasons, is a team that's able to compete with a national title contender level opponent. So I guess you can't really be that disappointed with how the opening Big 12 weekend went, can you?
Yeah, man, I'm going to be as positive as possible here. We won the 21 innings, like you said. We got 17. Not ideal, not the big stretch goal, but I definitely, this doesn't make me think that this team is suddenly a really, really bad team. Um, in the last game, being tied heading into the seventh, that's big against the number 2 team in the country. Imagine if you're able to pull that off. You weren't able to pull it off, but that's a win that makes you go, look, we can do this, right? There was a game last year versus Texas that you won, and it kind of gave you a little bit of belief, and then reality struck. But to be honest, it was still pretty solid. So, you know, that game was still really exciting. But you were able to tie him heading into the seventh. He gave up a bunch of runs in the seventh, but yeah, I think that is something you can build upon when you're playing the number 1 or number 2 team, depending on where you look in the country. Those are the little victories. That's how TCU felt against us in basketball this year, right? Like, I'm sure TCU fans were like, "Oh crap, that we actually looked pretty good against that Houston team," right? So those are things you can absolutely hang your hat on. I think something that keeps emerging weekend after weekend that I keep noticing is Nevaeh Brown is going to be really good for this team. She already is. I would say she's probably your ace. They kind of treat her like that. Even she got hit hard in the first game versus Texas Tech, but Texas Tech is going to hit everybody hard this season. And then in that last game, the reason why you were in that is she gave you a really solid performance in that game. So tough not to be excited for what she is doing in the circle. We've said we're looking for a pitcher who can do something in the circle. She comes in as a sophomore and is doing really good stuff in the circle. You may have 2 more years of her.
Yeah, I just didn't want to see this weekend. I mean, I don't think I would have been too mad about it regardless, but I didn't want to see 3 versions of the first 2 games. I didn't want to see like, oh, we lost 9-1, 10-0, 10-0. I would have liked one of these games to be a little punchy, and the Cougar softball team absolutely was. And I think that's really all you can hope for against the number 2 team in the country where you are right now in first year Chrissy Schoonmaker's build here.
Yeah, this is the kind of series that even though you get swept, that last game gives you a little bit of hope that things are going to be better this year than what you saw the previous 2.
Yeah, like that. I mean, I like that any of the games were competitive at any point at all, but like that the last one, like that, such as momentum as anything in sports at all, really, that you're going into this week, which by definition, since you're not playing the number 1 team in the country, so you're playing opponents that are all considerably worse than Texas Tech, that you go into it feeling not just completely demoralized by your toughest 3-game series the entire year.
Yeah, absolutely.
Quick mention, the Cougs played earlier tonight at home against Lamar, a 5-0 win. Paris Lehman and Nevaeh Brown combined for 2 hits and no runs in that one. Also got dingers from Ariel Redmond and McKenna Mitchell as well. Not really much takeaway there, but glad you didn't take a bad midweek loss to Lamar there. The big thing coming up here, the Cougs will be traveling for their first road Big 12 series of the season. First road series, period. Everything else from here has been neutral site stuff to this point. You will be playing the Kansas Jayhawks, who are 18-7 coming into the week with some decent non-conference wins. USF Boise and Wichita State are programs outside the big name conferences who've historically been good, though I'll admit I can't speak to how good those teams are in 2026. Probably played a bit less tough of a schedule than the Cougs, but not dramatically different. Expect this to be pretty high scoring. Kansas is coming into the week hitting 370 as a team. Haley Kripe is hitting over 400 with 7 homers to date. In total, the Jayhawks have 7 regulars who are hitting over 300 for the season. KU's pitching is not as rock solid, but Chloe Barber has a sub-3 ERA with really good strikeout numbers. Something to watch there against this Cougar lineup. I mean, these last 2 weekends have been really heavy on tougher opponents. You had A&M and UT Austin the weekend before. You had a 3-gamer with Tech last weekend. So this is your chance to prove that you can hit against opponents who are below that elite tier level and maybe pitch a bit better than you did against some of the better teams in the country. Though you can imagine I'm a bit more confident in the Cougs hitting at this point than the pitching, but I think this is a better chance to see how improved you are than Texas Tech, which is probably going to be an 0-3 weekend of some stripe, which ended up being.
Yeah, that was kind of my takeaway here as well. Is this is going to be a really solid way to see how much you have improved. Do I necessarily think you're going to win 2 of 3 or anything like that? No. Maybe you do. I think if you can establish yourself kind of at the level of Kansas, that's a huge improvement on the season.
Quick check-in now on the 2 winter sport championship teams that we talked about last week. We talked about track and field at the Big 12 Indoor Championships and swim and dive at their Big 12 Championships. Recapped it last week. Quick check-in on those teams heading into their NCAA postseasons. We officially found out last Wednesday the 3 Cougar athletes who will be representing the track and field program at NCAA Indoors this coming weekend in Fayetteville. Jamar Marshall Jr. in the 60 hurdles, Andrea Mita in the high jump, and your lone women's qualifier, Casey McCoy, who is also competing in the women's 60 hurdles. And yeah, I think it's exciting. Like you have from these 3 athletes 3 different kind of stories. Casey McCoy comes in here last year from Kansas. Maybe she's like a competitive Big 12 athlete last year. This season, we saw her really transform into one of the best in the country at her respective event. That's been pretty exciting. Andrea Mita going into his junior season here. I remember was pretty good as a freshman, improved as a sophomore, and then kind of improved slightly again this year. It's been kind of fun to watch his multi-year development into being one of the best men's high jumpers. And for Jamar Marshall Jr., his final NCAA indoors, different kind of story than the other 2 athletes. Started his career at Arizona State as one of the best in the country, and then health problems, had to work his way back into being that level of athlete again. So cool to see him at the end of a long college career get a chance to represent the Cougs one more times, and cool to see in the case of Mita and McCoy, 2 athletes who have really built towards being an NCAA level athlete in their respective events.
Yeah, just super exciting anytime anyone can head to a national championship in anything. At this point, it's indoors. I just saw a video of some outdoor or some track professionals be like, we're going to outdoors where the real legends are, or anything like that, right? Whatever. But anytime you get to go compete for a national championship, it's really exciting. I just want to see them have good performances here. I'm not going to take anything away from this. I just want them to get the opportunity to go represent the Cougs. If you wear Houston across your chest, I'm going to be pretty excited to cheer for you.
Yeah, I was mention also the outdoor season will begin the following week as the Cougs will host the Kirk Baptiste Invitational. I believe that one starts the Thursday after next, the 19th. And we had Cougar swim and dive, or I guess more specifically, the Cougar diving part of swim and dive in action this week at the NCAA diving zones in College Station. We talked about when we recapped the Big 12 championships and the Cougs performances there. We had multiple swimmers who punched their ticket to the NCAAs there, but that we would have to wait until this week to find out which divers would be joining their swim teammates. And good news, even with the event not entirely finished, we know multiple Cougs will be joining their swimming teammates. Junior Michelle McLeod has qualified for the NCAAs in both the 1 meter and the 3 meter. Freshman Maisie Wallison, your Big 12 diving freshman of the meet at the championships, will also be joining Michelle, qualified for the today in the 3 meter. So tomorrow you'll also see McLeod and sophomore Carolina Rowland will be representing the Cougs, competing in the platform diving event. Certainly wouldn't bet against Michelle making it 3 for 3 on NCAA event qualification. Exciting stuff to see that we, at least have 4 athletes at minimum who will be representing the Cougs in Atlanta at NCAAs.
Yeah. And again, the thing that catches my attention is you get a junior and a freshman in here, right? That's always really exciting to see those 2, or just to see youth coming through, and you're not necessarily surrounded by seniors who are going to carry this team. There's a lot of youth on this swim and dive team.
Yeah, out of the quartet, that have already qualified. Flo Peters, a senior, she'll get to end her decorated Cougar career in the NCAA championships, but Lexia Duncan, sophomore, Michelle McLeod, junior, Maisie Wilson, freshman, Carolina Rowland, if she qualifies, sophomore. So yeah, the youth is very exciting there as well. And last but not least, we will talk about the first road Big 12 matches of the season from your Houston Cougar tennis program as we go to Tennis Corner. Not as triumphant as last week, though knew coming into last weekend that the road trip to the Arizona schools would be a challenging one, probably your most challenging road trip weekend of Big 12 play in total, and not a weekend entirely devoid of positive takeaways either. Friday evening at number 12 Arizona State was always going to be very challenging. What about, I'd say about as challenging as expected? The Sun Devils won the first two courts doubles matches, got out to a 1-0 lead, never really looked back, and then in the singles portion won on courts 1, 3, and 5 to get the needed 4 points and clinch the match. This one was the one that you had to kind of squint to see the positives from, but they were certainly there. Valeria Croatina on court 4 bounced back from her first set loss. She had forced a third set that she was up in early when the match was called, and Sophie Schouten was up in her second set after winning the first at the point the match was called as well. And that's not nothing, that you had multiple players who actually showed themselves as capable of winning against this level of an opponent. Probably disappointed that maybe you couldn't put more pressure on ASU in the doubles portion of the match, but this was never an opponent I had serious hopes of the Cougs beating when I looked at the Big 12 schedule. And if anything, ASU has surpassed their preseason expectations when they were already going to be one of those teams competing around the top of the Big 12. Sunday afternoon against Arizona was undeniably a heartbreaker, but still in total, probably this team's most complete road effort since joining the Big 12. Like the ASU match, I think the part that will stick in the craw of Coach Cat and the team a bit is the doubles portion. Cougs lost decisively in court 2, but were very close on 1 and 3, with both of those matches tied 5-5 late on. But Wildcats ultimately won 7-5 in court 1 to clinch that point and put the Cougs down 1-0 overall. I mean, this match was probably exhibit A of the importance of getting that first point from doubles, because this was very, very close on singles. U of A won decisively on courts 2 and 5. They got out to a 3-0 lead, but Cougs definitely made the home Wildcats sweat, bouncing back from a really tough loss to the number 19 player in the country from ASU. Lisa Morosova got her first ever court 1 singles win in Big 12 play. She won hers in straight sets to be the first winning Cougar player to get off her court. Valeria Croatina won a second set tiebreaker to win her match in straight sets, cut the overall lead to 3-2. Sophie Schouten actually won 2 different tiebreakers to get her team leading 10th singles win of the season on court 6, tied the match at 3. And on court 3, Shems had forced a third set in that one, but ultimately could not complete the comeback, lost that one 6-3, and gave Arizona their 4th point to clinch the overall match. Anytime, really regardless of sport, when you come extremely close to winning and don't, you feel some frustration afterwards. You look at the little things here and there and say, if we had done this, if we had done that, we could have won this match. But I would say still far from no positives to take away from this weekend. I mean, last season and the one before, you rarely seriously competed against the more established Big 12 programs away from home. You did that here. I think the next step is figuring out the little ways to win these kinds of matches going forward. So this week, the Cougars will return to Houston. We'll play a couple more Big 12 matches. Tougher one will probably be on Friday at 1 p.m. The Texas Tech Lady Raiders, who come in 3-1 in Big 12 play with road wins over Kansas and Iowa State and a home win last weekend over K-State with a loss to a ranked Oklahoma State team at home in the middle. And earlier in the season, they also had a loss to common opponent Arizona State and a narrow win over Arizona, but both of those at non-conference events won't count towards their Big 12 win-loss total. Biggest picture assessment I can give of Tech is that they're better than the Utah and BYU teams that we've seen the Cougs face at home already, but also not so good that I think it's impossible the Cougs can get the upset here. I mean, I think the toughest hurdle is going to be doubles. The Raiders have been very, very good in doubles this year. Shems and Sophie actually faced their top pair, Murphy and Dmitrichenko, at ITA sectionals during the fall season, lost to them in College Station. And so far, that pair is 12-3 this season. So they're going to be very, very tough on court 1, but not as brutally tough on courts 2 and 3. I think to potentially put pressure on this opponent and get the upset, you're going to have to get more from Eva and Valeria on doubles court too than you have in recent matches to have a chance here. In singles, Haley Murphy, who's one of the doubles players I just mentioned a moment ago, she's your top singles player on court 1 with a 7-2 record. But the rest of the Raiders singles lineup isn't nearly as bulletproof as Murphy. But fair to say the Cougars will need to play better than they did at times last weekend to get the points they need to win this one. Tech still isn't one of the teams that I expected to win against when I looked at the Big 12 schedule before the season. So a win here would be a bonus. A win would be an upset versus my preseason expectations. But also, given how the Cougars have played this year, I've at least moved it into the realm of the possible, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. That's what, you've overperformed what we thought this team was going to be already. So it makes sense that you would raise expectations a little bit here.
And on Sunday at 1, the Cougars will host the Colorado Buffaloes to close out the weekend's home action. Said earlier that Tech was better than the Utah and BYU teams we've seen previously, and Colorado is kind of the flip of that. I believe they're slightly worse than Utah and BYU, but also still capable of playing well enough to beat the Cougars. The Buffs have been weirdly up and down. They lost Friday at home to a K-State team that hasn't been very good, and then on Sunday beat an Oklahoma State team that's shorthanded, but also still shorthanded is one of the better Big 12 programs. I mean, because of the elevation they play at, obviously they have a big advantage at home. I know when I talked to Kat last season at BYU, she talked about how that was one, even played indoors, she thought the Cougars struggled a bit on the road. They're going to be playing in a very different environment in Houston, and one of their biggest weaknesses this season has been doubles outside of court 2, where they've been very good, which I think puts some pressure on your best pairings this year. Shems and Sophie on court 1, Lisa and Petchy on 3 to really take care of business. But I mean, so far the Buffs have only won the doubles point in 1 of their 4 Big 12 matches to date. They've been pretty good in singles though. Aya Al-Said and Rix Vanderwerf have been their top 2 singles players. Lanny Brotman has been their singles wins leader, mostly playing in court 4 this spring. So won't be a gimme. Cougars will still have to play good tennis to win this, but I think they should be able to win this one. And I think ultimately this canon should be a 1-1 weekend when it's all said and done. 2-0 is within the realm of possible, but I think you need to pick up at least one Big 12 win from this pair of matches. It'll feel like you're on track, feel like you're the team that's been exceeding expectations that we've talked about most of the season.
Love it. Look forward to those matches this weekend.
Bobby, that's it. A tight 75-ish minutes of talking Houston Cougar sports. Actually, no, a tight 80-ish minutes of talking Houston Cougar sports. Take us home, pal.
All right, well, that is it for this week of the Scott and Holman podcast. First of all, I want to thank you guys for listening to this 180 minutes of Cougar sports.
180 minutes.
Is that what I said? No, it's just 80 minutes, not 180.
I'm sorry. I'll stop interrupting you.
No. Go me here. I misspoke. I got you earlier. You can get me here. But in all seriousness, we do thank you guys so much for listening. You don't have to. We hope we give you enough good information. But if you do have any feedback for us, you can find us on social media, on Twitter at SH Podcast. You can find us on Blue Sky at podcast.bsky.social. And if you have sworn off all of your social media, good for you, but you can email us at shpodcast@gmail.com. And if you are looking to throw a couple of dollars behind us, or you want that premium content that you got the preview of earlier, $5 a month gets you that on patreon.com/shpodcast. I think I covered it all, Sam. What do we always say here, bud?
Go Cougs.
All right. Go Cougs. Let's go.